Welcome to the Tech Panel.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The podcast where tech minds meet.
Oh, hey, before we get started today, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell.
Welcome to the Tech Panel, where we unpack the trends, strategies, and stories shaping the future of tech business. I'm your host, Arvin.
And I'm Jamie, and today we are thrilled to have a true startup marketing maestro with us, Gerard Doyle, the founder of Fractal. Gerard's helped countless entrepreneurs turn their big ideas into thriving businesses.
That's right. From founding 3 startups to steering brands like Naked Wines, Two Bays Brewing Co. to success, Gerard knows how to cut through the noise. And we're going to kick things off with a big one. What's the number one marketing mistake startups make that kill their growth before they even start? Trust me, you're going to want to hear this.
Plus, we'll dig into authentic branding, digital marketing, and why storytelling is a startup's secret weapon. So, settle in and let's get started with Gerard Doyle. This is the Tech Panel.
Gerard, welcome to the show. How you going, mate?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on board. Why don't you take a moment to sort of introduce to the audience who you are, what it is that you do, and what technology you've brought to the market?
So I am a 3-time startup founder and 3 times manager of large global agencies. And yeah, really for me, my career was like dual tracking. Like I was doing the agency stuff because I was good at selling ideas to big companies. But my passion was always running my own businesses and doing startups. And then had an amazing epiphany one day where I went, do you know what I should do? I should, instead of like jumping back and forth, I should combine both of these things and build an agency, which I know, for startups, which I love. And that's ultimately why I created Fractal, which is great because who else wants to run an agency selling to clients who are ultimately all going broke at different speeds? So I kind of find I'm in an agency market of just ourselves.
I love that for you.
You said your passion is working with these startups, but what is more fun, bootstraps or boardrooms?
Oh, I mean, we all know the answer is going to be, bootstrap founders. I mean, Look, in many respects, it's what I don't love about the other side, right? I don't like working with middle managers where you sell an idea, a campaign, you launch it, you run it. It doesn't matter what it does. You got to talk it up. Like the campaign can fail and you've got to go, well, I got to make you look good. So let's talk about, it's like the branding value of the campaign that we ran that was supposed to be direct marketing and we got great branding value and cut through. That just used to drive me insane. When I'm working with founders, they actually, if you're honest with them, they're really responsive. You go, this isn't working. They go, great, let's cut it and let's try something else. Like they're happy. Happy is an overstatement, but they like to have some failure because they can cut that cost and focus on something else. A middle manager, everything has to work. Everything has to be a success.
What have you found has been the most exciting startup you've worked with?
Oh, the most exciting startup.
Yeah, what's been the one that you've been really like, oh, I can get my teeth into this and this is like a really exciting idea and just sort of like really enjoyed the journey of that?
Oh man, I feel like I've got a pressure now with a whole bunch of existing clients and past clients. And who do I give credit to?
What would be your ideal? So if you had the dream client come to you and be like, this is what we want, what would that dream be for your ears?
I think it's a combination where the founder is a domain expert. Like they absolutely know the area they're moving into. They are super open to multiple paths to achieve their overall objective, right? So let's imagine this person's got like their startup journey is going to be climbing Everest. They know they want to get to the top. That's fine. We don't get away, but they're totally open to the different paths we might take to get there. That's my ideal. So they're like, I am an expert. I know what I want to do. I know I want to climb up Everest, but I don't really mind how I get there as long as I get there in the end.
Yeah.
That's the dream for me. So someone who's willing to test and learn and stay focused on the big picture. Whereas, the worst clients are the ones that go, I want to do a marketing campaign that does this. Like I want to do SEO or I want to do email. I want to do cold outreach or LinkedIn. You go, that's a tactic, right? Like that's not what you're trying to do. What are you ultimately trying to solve? And those methodical kind of almost core objective focused founders, they're the dream. They're the absolute dream. We've got one at the moment, and maybe it's because he comes from a consulting background, but he's great. It's like every single whip that we have, every sprint that we run with him, he just goes, oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's try it like this. And he just throws it away. He's happy to go again. And that iterative learning process, that's it. And I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of clients who have had that approach, and I love working with them.
You definitely see why. I'm still kind of like having a little bit of PTSD of working in boardrooms, people trying to sell them on things and get them across. Are there any sort of marketing myths that you discovered that you'd sort of love to disappear from your job that you're just dealing with on a recurring basis when you're having these conversations?
Yeah, look, marketing, look, let's get really sort of high level here, but marketing, you can't do everything, right? If your product doesn't work, if people don't want the solution, marketing can't really fix that. Maybe I'm a little bit, maybe I've got rose tinted glasses on marketing, but I like to think that marketing's job is to reveal the possibilities of the product or the service. It's to help someone understand how this can work for them. That's our job.
Sure.
The negative version of marketing is to trick people. Oh, you're just going to trick this or trick me into doing something. And look, it's a spectrum, right? There's a range, and there is an element of trickery and cleverness in marketing. But I think most people, it's pretty hard to trick people completely. And so for me, what I want to get away from is this idea that, I guess it's almost sounds like I'm trying to avoid accountability a bit here, right? But you can't, a perfect product won't market itself as much as people want to believe that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And perfect marketing won't make a failed product work either, right? It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And so, on one hand, I don't want to be held completely responsible for the failure. On the other hand, I don't want to be dismissed as being irrelevant. It's somewhere in that middle ground. And look, we live in a very gray world. And I think marketing sits beautifully in the middle of that gray world where we're not one extreme or the other.
What do you think one of the biggest marketing mistakes startups and founders make that kills their growth before they've even started their journey?
It's going to be over-investing in an idea before you've tested the primary thesis. So what happens is, in our mind's eye, sitting with a co-founder, sitting at a pub, coming up with a marketing idea, we over-invest in the execution. We over-invest in the collateral and assets that we need to get something to deliver, right? Yeah. So we think, influencers, this is the big thing. We're going to do this. And everyone races out and they try to get like a Kardashian or some, superstar to test small.
Yeah.
Test and boil your thesis down to the lowest common variable that you can test, the cheapest way to test that thesis, right? Yes, a Kardashian may be your dream, but you don't have to start there. You can just get anyone to make a similar kind of video. The scale's not going to be there, but at least you can test the thesis. So for me, the biggest common mistake I see is that, and this is a trait of business owners and founders, right? We love working. Like we are at our happiest when we're tinkering and we're working hard and we're doing late nights. So we're not afraid to work, but we tend to find comfort in working harder and longer and avoid that going public moment, right? That testing it. And actually you can test stuff really cheaply. Like you can spin up a Google ad or a Meta ad or a TikTok ad in minutes and, just put something out into the market and just see if it sticks.
Yeah.
Whereas, people spend so long thinking about branding and colors and messaging, and that's great. Like there's a place for it, but at a fundamental level, if you spend too much time, then your sunk cost becomes so great that it's really hard to revert.
Sure.
So if we go back to like that idea I had of like trying to climb a mountain, right? And we're happy to take any path. Well, sometimes we're climbing the mountain, we'll get to a cliff face and go, we can't go up. Like it's not working.
Yeah.
And so we need to back down and try another direction. Now, if we've gone for 7-8 weeks in one direction and then discover that like the 7th or the 8th week, we can't go this path and we've got to backtrack for another 8 weeks, turn around, try something else, I probably get back to the bottom of the mountain and give up and go home. But if I've only done a day and I look and go, oh, there's a cliff here and I can turn around, that's okay. I can do that. I can face it. And so, to your original point, the most important, the biggest mistake people make is over-investing in the size of the test. And, if you can just run through in your mind and question yourself, is this the smallest possible test I can make to test this thesis before I scale it? Yeah. You're probably going to be in a pretty good place.
I've dealt with that countless times where I'm working with an exec team and they have an idea and they believe it is the right thing for the business and everyone has to get on board and you just start investing into it. And they never tested the idea. And when the results don't come through, a lot of people fail to realize that like, it's not because it's being executed poorly. It wasn't a good idea to begin with. And we didn't test the market enough, really try a little bit, see what the results would have been off the back of that, and a justifier off the back of it. And you're right, people do make that mistake. They come up with the idea, invest wholeheartedly into it, and just think it's supposed to work because on its face value, it looks like it should. And that's not how reality works in many instances. You do need to test these things.
Totally. And, hindsight, we can always look at campaigns and they always seem obvious. But when you're going forward and you're kind of coming up with your ideas, all the ideas seem valid. All the ideas could work, and you ask the question, can I imagine a world where this is correct? Yes, I absolutely can. Yeah. But the reality is that 19 out of 20 of these paths are not going to be the correct way. And then we just need to work that out. So, and that gets right back to what, I was saying before, like, why do I pick these things? Why do I like working with founders? Because they're willing to do small tests. They don't have to go all in on a big bet. And, the world's moved on. We don't live in a Mad Men kind of world now where you need to pitch a creative idea, you put out a TV ad, and then you wait 3 or 4 months for the results. It's like, we wait 3 or 4 minutes to get results now, right? We can do that. So, applying old techniques from the 60s and 70s just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. And I'm glad to hear that your experience with founders out in the market is openness to the idea of changing paths and being nimble. That definitely makes me feel better about what the state of the union is out there. What's your vibe when you first come into a company? They're obviously hiring you for marketing, and you come in and all you do is you see a whiteboard full of ideas everywhere. Like, this is my grand plan. Like, what's your first reaction to that? Do you just think like, oh, it's all mapped out? Or you're like, oh, here we go?
Oh, look, I don't like fleshed out marketing strategies early on for a product that has no customers, right? It's like a work of fiction. It's a great story, and we can imagine that's the journey, and it's never going to really happen.
True.
Look, in the same way, sometimes the first brief we get is, we want you to write a marketing strategy and a marketing budget, and you just go, that doesn't work here. Like, we literally don't know what we're going to do. So what I want to see is someone who has like a product roadmap. They're really focused on where they're going to go and how they're going to expand the product, but what their product does right now. If that whiteboard is full of product ideas, problem solutions, and they're just very much focused on that, super happy. If the team or the person I speak to, and they've got a lot of marketing ideas, that can be okay. And we can run a lot of experiments. The scary thing for me is if some of those ideas are too fixed, and it's just, you sit there and you just go, oh, is that really the right thing? I think, to give you a real example of one that always catches me is SEO, right? So my first love was SEO. I did that I'm old now. So 1995, I started doing SEO. So my SEO experience predates Google in its existence. It didn't even exist back then. So Larry and Sergey hadn't even kind of hung out and come up with their theories yet. And little old me was at, university and trying to work out SEO for Yahoo and Excite and Web Wombat and everything else that predates almost everyone who's listening to this, right? But for a startup, SEO is a long strategy. And we can get into the semantics around whether it's free traffic or paid for the work, etc. But, SEO is like setting off a cargo ship on an ocean in a direction. You're saying this is where you want to go. It's super efficient. It doesn't use a lot, but sometimes you got to hop on a plane, fly over, carry one box of stuff and do a little test, right?
Yeah. Is
it the most efficient way? No. But if you get to the other country, you try to sell your box of widgets and no one buys it, well, you can turn around and fly back, right? But if you if you bought an entire shipping container and you're sending it across the ocean and it's going to take months to arrive, you kind of can't turn it around, right? And I think it's sort of really apt at the moment. There's a lot of container ships coming from China to the US, and you kind of go, oh, it's a bit late to turn them around now. We're kind of stuck with it, right? So, SEO is one of those ones where if someone comes to me like, I want to do SEO, I'm like, I almost have to have a hard stop on that one. It's like, let's do something else first. Let's work out if this is even the right kind of customers, right? So that's like an example of a signal that if I get that, I know we've got to like reset expectations and get in, right? That's a tactic. Let's go a little bit further back here. Let's discover your actual customer first. Even though I know in your mind's eye, you know who your customer is, let's run a few experiments first and really figure that out.
Yeah. And I obviously imagine like this has to be a result of just the oversaturation of marketing out there. Like if you're a business owner, you're like, how do I do this? And like the first thing, anything Google's going to tell you, search engine optimization is the key to your success or die. You know what I mean? It's like, I almost
It's
can't
like
even
a
blame
movie
them.
voiceover.
But I hear what you're saying, but maybe we should get into what is it that Fractal does? How do you plug this gap? Like what is it you do that helps get a product onto the market that no one's actually heard about?
Yeah, so with Fractal, I think people who work at Fractal, I describe as being their experience as being like triangles. And so in my big agency land, we created silos of skills where you go, this is our SEO expert, and his skill would be like really pointy and really narrow. And this guy would just focus at SEO, even to the point where you talk about paid search and you go, oh, I don't do paid search. You're like, dude, it's all Google. Like, no, I just do this thing. That doesn't work in the new world, and it definitely doesn't work with startups, right? So everyone who works at Fractal, I kind of imagine being more like a triangle where, yes, you've got your area of expertise, but you have to be willing to adapt and learn the other aspects to see if there's maybe a better way of doing it. Now, what does Fractal do? So we have a really regimented process, which is, all of our clients work on sprints. They work on a weekly sprint, which is to say we have a meeting every week. And every week, the agenda is the same. What did we do? What did we learn? Where are we blocked? What are we going to do next? And who's going to do it? Yeah. That's the agenda. And the idea behind that is if something's going to take more than a week, break it down, make it smaller. But our first objective with clients is let's discover how we get the attention of your audience. Let's discover who that audience is, right? So we apply kind of like a loose framework based around pirate metrics. I don't know if you guys have heard of pirate metrics, but there was a chap, Dave McClure, came up with this phrase. And I like pirate metrics because it's good marketing, right? Because when I say pirate metrics, it's memorable. And the idea was it's an acronym based around A's and R's. So the sound that a pirate would make, which is, R. And it's, you've got an audience, you've got attention, you've got acquisition, and then you move into your R's, which is like retention, revenue, recurring, or
referral.
I've totally butchered that up. Yeah, referral, that's the one. Thank you. You can Google faster than I can remember anything. And so, what I love about this, apart from the fact that pirate metrics sticks in your head, and people don't remember what the A's and the R's are, is you start with the audience. And so you have to start with the thesis. Like, well, who would be interested in this? And so often we start with something really, really simple, which is, hey, let's just use existing content, right? Let's find that audience and let's throw existing blogs and articles at these people, not ads, not even anything we've written. Let's just throw commentary that speaks to the problem at a particular audience and see what they click on. So in its simplest form, we could go into Meta, go, this is our target audience, and then we just go and pick 10 articles that speak to that problem that we're trying to address. And you throw those articles at that audience, the traffic's not even coming to us. It's not even going. You could be going to Forbes, the Daily Mail and, the Financial Times and Startup Daily, right? Totally other sites. We just look and go, which one do people click on? What do they interact with? And then when we see that, we get some early learnings. So, before when I spoke about what's the quickest way we can test something, we didn't even have to have a website. We didn't even have to have a domain. We can quite literally run experiments using other people's content to see if people even care. And at that really, really early level, Fractal, we can come in and say, do you know what? No matter how many times we run articles talking about X, Y, or Z that you've said is core, this market doesn't care. Like they don't care at all. There's no clicks, there's no interactions, there's no comments. This is not the path to market, right? That is great if you discover it in the first sprint. Now, if you had invested 6 months in developing positioning and content and branding and a website and everything else that talks about that problem, and it turns out no one even cares, well, again, you found yourself halfway off a mountain and you have to turn around and come back. So what does Fractal do? I guess we impose that discipline to run through those tests and we say, hey, we ran all these articles. This one got clicks. All right, let's find more articles that speak to that theme. Okay, now we can pull some stuff out. Now let's write something for you. Now let's own the content, see if it was specific to that website or your content. And now let's build acquisitions. Let's do ebooks. Let's do white papers, downloadables, but superficial things that we can keep kind of really forward before we're sort of saying, hey, enter your credit card here and buy our SaaS product. Like, no, let's actually make sure we're pitching in the right direction. So for me, Fractal brings in a wide variety of skills. Like we'll approach things in lots of different ways, but it's that methodical test and learn process where we're just open to the idea of experimenting. And I guess for me, it comes back to, when I said I had this dual career where I do big agency and startups, like I'm not quite madman level, but I was pretty good in a boardroom. I was pretty good at the pitch. And I felt like I could sell most ideas to most people, right? If you can tell a good story and you can stand up convincingly and you can convince people to spend a lot of money, and it might not be the right idea. And with founders, that's just not what I want to do. Like for the most part, I'm spending their money, right? Like as in they've done a job, they're investing it. That's not to say that I would waste clients' money, but it's real. And you just sort of say, hey, let's just spend $5 here, $50 there. And I think for the kind of clients that I want to work with and most founders, that's appealing. Like they understand that value. There are a few that you'll get that would much rather spend $5,000 to $15,000 on the full strategy and the whole pitch because they find comfort in that old school approach. But that's just not the way we approach it. So, with Fractal, it's just about iterative learning and going through that journey and trying to climb that mountain and discover there's a lot of different ways to get there. And we're just trying to find the most efficient way. So, look, we provide services and we cover a whole bunch of different things. And I always say to the clients, like in any one individual vertical, we're not the best, right? So if you came and said, well, Gerard, you've been doing SEO since 1995, you should be really good at it. It's like, no, if your entire focus is SEO, I am not the person for you and Fractal's not the agency for you. Like that's just never the case. But if you're kind of open-minded and you want to learn and discover what the best path is, then work with us. And then, if SEO at some point in the future becomes absolutely critical to your business, then you'll either hire a specialist agency or bring someone in-house, right? That's, so in many respects, you kind of got to look and go, at some point, we'll onboard and in-house that skill. So, maybe that's what I tell myself. When clients get big and successful and we kind of slowly do less work for them, they're graduating. We're not losing a client, they graduated. So, that's the dream, I guess, for us.
True.
So I guess sort of on the back of that, how can startups, and it's an ever important balancing act at times, the need that they find the need for immediate growth with building a sustainable brand, especially with the resources that are limited at the beginning of their journey. So what is advice on how to balance this out for them?
Yeah, look, it is tough to be thinking about building a sustainable brand in terms of the company. I think, look, I was chatting to a founder yesterday and she's absolutely awesome. And I won't name her because I haven't asked permission, but I was just sort of saying to her, I think about it in terms of founder brand, company brand, product brand. And I just think if you brand yourself, like people buy off people, it's much easier to sell yourself than a company. If you brand yourself as an expert in your area that's focused on solving their problem, then that's the best way you can do it. So as a founder and running your own experiments, think about what that core problem is that you're solving. Think about kind of donuts of content around that, and then build your personal brand and leverage that. Because those early customers, those early adopters, where your product's not quite right and things aren't there, they're going to buy off you because they like you as a founder. They want to support you. They've got a bias. Like a lot of us now, we buy off small businesses because we want to support them. Like, so I'm going to attach myself to a founder and fully accept their product's not going to be entirely there, but I'm on the journey with them. Like it's not quite there, but I'm happy to have that. And look, this doesn't apply in all aspects of our lives. Like some things we absolutely don't want to experiment with. So, I'd like my seatbelt to be 100% tested, right? I'm not really want to experiment on that, but there are other things that I am willing to experiment on. So for me, my advice to founders is I think just focus on your personal brand, align yourself around that problem. And when I say donuts of content, what I mean is, your product might solve a really specific problem, but if you just look one level out from that, you sort of say, okay, what's the equivalent? Like what's the next layer of commentary around that? And for startup founders, they'll often find that the really specific problem they're solving isn't fully appreciated yet. It's not something that the world's gone, oh yeah, we need that. Like, because if it's genuinely new, then no one's searching for it. So what's that next layer around that? So I'll use an example. We did some work with a gut microbiome testing company called Microba. World leaders, full of scientists, absolutely amazing product, right? So this is the gut microbiome and the idea that you need to create biodiversity in your gut to be healthy. And I 100% believe it is one of the best growth areas for, human health, right? Like it's such a big thing. We kind of recognize ourselves as being like an ecosystem, not just an individual body. Yeah, let's caveat this with Gerard doesn't know that much about this topic. I'm the marketer, but I know enough to be dangerous. Now, people aren't looking for gut microbiome testing kits for home because we don't really know that it's very few people really understand it. What do people get? People get probiotics. They understand what a probiotic is because I get a probiotic yogurt, right? So that content is to say, can we produce content around gut microbiome testing? Yes. But is anyone really interested in that? No, because it's so new, there's not a market. But that next layer out is probiotics. And the idea people go, oh, I'm having probiotics because it's good gut health. They know your Colt and all the other branding that's out there. So sometimes you just need to position yourself in that layer of content, get the people to engage, and then take them on that journey to go a little bit further. And so from a personal founder branding point of view, sometimes you've got to say, okay, what's that layer, that ring just outside my core offering? I'm going to produce a lot of content around that topic. So, so if you're talking about, I was talking about to a founder who's building a rehab diary product. And the idea is that it's an app designed for athletes or at least sports people who have an injury because the recovery process is different. Almost everything is built for the on and the up. Any training program, any app, anything you do is all about getting bigger, faster, whatever, stronger. So it's all sort of up and to the right in terms of your progress. But if anyone's similar age to me and you're kind of middle age and you're trying to do running or anything like that, you're going to get an injury. And so Rehab Diary taps into that. Now, to build a personal brand around that means you've got to tap into the idea of providing advice around torn ligaments, calves, hamstrings, strains, breaks, scrapes, all those kind of things and how you get around that. So your content doesn't have to be specifically around diarizing and the benefit of diarizing that. Your content needs to be around the fact that, I've got a strain. Like, how do I treat it? What do I do? Then, you can allude to the idea of actually it's a long process. And Gerard, you're in your mid 40s here. This is going to take you 6 months before you're better again. Yep. I think, it's a long-winded answer, but I definitely would be recommending personal branding in the area much more than trying to brand around content. You kind of have to leave, and the company, you really got to leave that until until you've climbed that mountain and you've got success. Then you can start to build a bit of a wall and a bit of a moat around your business.
Right. So that makes sense. Do you find you get much pushback with that particular advice? Because I'm assuming like quite a lot of founders, like they're like stars in their eyes and they're like ready, they're gung-ho, right? And this is a sort of like, oh, let's pull back a little bit. Do you find you get much pushback, like, and then going, oh, I want to go, 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 go?
I think you do. I think everyone's a little bit impatient and you want to test these things. And I think probably a lot of that's just driven by runway. People don't have a big runway. They're like, I've got to get this working in X amount of time. You will get that. And I think, look, we don't ever have, when we take on a client, that client needs to be either well-funded or have their first customers or some sense of revenue going. Like, I don't want to work with a business that's, I've got no funding and I've just got an idea. I've just got a product. It's like, hey, if you're not ready to test this, we're not ready to get started.
Yeah.
You do get pushback. I guess from two different paths. Sometimes you get founders that really want to build up their personal profile and it's more about the glory of themselves than actually the product and the business. But yeah, generally people just, they want to go fast. And I would say the biggest battle we have is that it's really hard to see why your idea is not going to work. If you're completely bought into your idea and your solution, it's really hard because when we're a domain expert, we kind of have blinkers on. And we all do this in our lives, right? We look at something that we fully understand. You go, how can you not see that? Like, how are you not aware of this?
Yeah.
And it's like, because you're an expert, right? So I can see everything, but to the rest of the world, they've got no idea. And that's really hard to do. It's really hard to be self-aware enough to realize that, yes, you've got a PhD in cancer detection and you've been working with MRI machines for X long. You totally get why AI is the future, blah, blah, blah. To everyone else, they're like, I just don't really get it. That's not my area of expertise. And so I think that's the biggest thing is for them, because the solution seems so damn obvious in their minds, they're like, don't we just go flat out because everyone's just going to go, yeah, of course, this is the perfect way.
Yeah.
We don't as people. We're not experts. We make our decisions based on one or two bits of information. We genuinely don't buy the best product most of the time. We just don't know what it is. So, I might take in consideration one or two variables, but for the most part, we just go, yeah, near enough. That'll do. Right. So I did it yesterday. We were looking to buy some brochures, and it was just kind of like, we looked at Canva print on demand, and I was like, oh, it seems a bit expensive. Then we looked at Officeworks, Snap Printing, a few others, Vistaprint, and then we just go, oh, who cares? Just hit buy and just go. It doesn't matter. And to someone in the printing industry, that would drive them insane because they're like, do you know how much they charge? The paper's terrible, the delivery's slow, whatever it happens to be, right?
But that sort of fatigue you get as a buyer when you're looking at things like that. I do it all the time. I'm like, I just cannot be bothered anymore. Just whatever, like, buy, because you do get fatigued. And my point coming around to, a lot of companies do say on socials in particular, so like digital marketing, getting into that side of things, and they post and post and post and post and post, and it's almost like a spam. And there is that sort of, I think there was a saying around it about this, like, fatigue of people seeing the same branding all the time coming up, that it then works on a more negative, and then they're like, can you hide this? Like, I don't want to see this anymore. Do you find that companies are, because I know that was a massive thing, like when socials were sort of more focused, it was like, oh, we can push our brand here, right? We can do this. And there was that like viewer fatigue of it, was just like, I'm overseeing this. Has that settled down now in a digital marketing way, or is that still a thing where companies are just like pounding out these posts and it's like, oh, we don't want to see this anymore?
I think the platforms have taken care of it for us.
Yeah.
I think ultimately you're 100% right. Like people would just be, a big brand would turn up with money and just go, let's just run the same damn ad over and over and over. Digital marketers, particularly social media marketers, now know that, if the frequency of your social media post is too high, when I say too high, it's like if Facebook is showing someone the same post 2 or 3 times in a week, they're like, yeah, that's done. So Facebook, it is logarithmic, like the cost. They will just scale it so fast. And then eventually they just turn the ad off. They just go, oh, we're not showing anyone. So actually, I think the platforms have taken care of it for us and they're forcing us. And so anyone who's run the same ad for a while, you're running it, it's working, you got a positive ROI, you're really, really happy. And then all of a sudden it just tanks. Yeah. And that's because Meta just woke up and went, yeah, everyone's seen that, we're over it.
Yeah. Okay.
And the catalyst for that is tiny. Like, like when you're on social media, if you're on TikTok and you press a little arrow button, you make a comment. It's like, it's repetitive. You click that repetitive button, you're killing that. I mean, that, like a small soul of a digital marketer somewhere just died because you're like repetitive, seen it too much. And TikTok's like, yeah, that's dead, right? But we all know it, right? It appears too often. So look, I think at the end of the day, some businesses just had far too much money and the platforms had to come up with a better way in terms of user interactions. And the way I always think about it is, look, I'm a kind of white middle-aged male, right? So every sports book in Australia is convinced that I need to be gambling with them. And so, the budget they've got to acquire me as a customer, and I'm not a potential customer, but I tick all the demographic boxes, it's huge. Yeah. Which means that a small little startup company that might be trying to sell me gut microbiome health tablets or something just cannot compete. They need to acquire me for a couple of dollars. And Ladbrokes are sitting there going, yeah, we'll spend $3 or $4 grand on you. Yeah. So, so the platforms have had to really dial that up to stop that ad fatigue kicking in. But also, I think digital marketers now they're just used to just smashing out variations, right? Yeah. So with the advent of AI, they're just like, oh, variation, new copy, new copy, new copy. And that, like, for a lot of people, that's the retainer, right? It's just new copy every day, every week, just keep producing it. So I think that does help avoid fatigue a little bit. Yeah. That in combination with, influencers and creatives that you partner with helps a little bit as well. But look, I think the platforms have taken care of it a little bit and kept it pretty fresh for us.
Yeah, that's good. So you've actually done 3 startups yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, some have been successful, some haven't. I would highly recommend making the last one you do successful. I didn't. I was more successful at the start and then got the arrogance of like, I can do this myself. I've done it once. It must be the same every time. Yeah, no. So the least successful startup I had was the last one I did in Australia. Didn't make any money, lost money on that one. And, probably bet more of my money on that one. What it means for me is that I have that experience of some success. I also know and have very relatable empathy towards founders and what it is to be struggling, right?
That was my next thing was like,
yeah.
what specific tactics do you recommend for these other startups that you're now helping to stand out to investors and stuff like that? Like from your takeaways from success and then one that wasn't so successful. And then now obviously you're back on the rise with your current one with Fractal, but what tactics could you push across to these other founders that you're like, yeah, this is, true and tried?
Yeah, look, you can buy scale and you can make your top line revenue go up by spending more money, right? So that is one trap that founders fall into. Venture capitalists are pretty smart and clued into that now. So they look at unit economics, they look at, how these things work out. So the most common startups these days are SaaS-based startups. And, you basically need to build a business where you sort of say, hey, we can acquire customers for X. The payback of X is, 3 months. And that's our window. That to me, that's for like, we'll talk specifically about a SaaS company. Like the ideal scenario to get to is where you say to a venture capitalist, and a lot of the time with Fractal, we're engaged to basically achieve this bite point, which is to say, we can acquire customers for X. We can get the payback of that after 3 months worth of subscription, which also shows a level of stickiness with the product. And then the venture capitalists can look and go, okay, so your funding gap is the month before you acquire the customer spending, the 3 months of the customer. So it's like a 4-month window, which founders don't have that kind of cash. So, okay, venture capitalist steps in. And then the only other question is, what's the total addressable market, obtainable market? And we're able to use digital, just go, well, it's kind of this, because we've seen this is how many people we can reach, but we're only reaching this many. So if we up the budget or we add another country to it, that's the opportunity. And so if you can get to a stage where you can present a venture capitalist, yeah, you got to do your product and founder and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, if you can present an equation, which is, hey, we can acquire customers, they stick with us, the payback window's here, so I need you to fill that funding gap. And if you fill that funding gap, this is the obtainable market we can go after. So the more you fill it, the faster we can hit that market. You usually find you're having a pretty meaningful conversation pretty quickly. For my last startup, our payback window was just far too long. Like it just wasn't really there. And although we had growth, our growth was very much driven by, we were buying our growth. We were spending money and we were growing because we were spending more money, but we weren't necessarily becoming more efficient at it. So, for most founders, that's where they're ultimately driving their business. And that's what we will try to help them get to. And then, if it's not working, it comes down to a bit of consultant radical candor and sort of saying, I don't think this is going to work, and that's, that can be hard, but sometimes you've got to have that conversation as well.
Do you ever think that marketing is just going to be useless for some companies? Do you ever just look at someone and you're just like, it doesn't matter what we do together. Like, it's my job, but
yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Like
the most common point where marketing becomes, where we discover it is becoming a bit useless, is where we're driving a whole bunch of people who are like super keen on the idea. They're like, yes, I identify with that problem. Like, you got my attention. I recognize the problem. They get to the landing page and they just look at it and go, yeah, but either the barrier to adopt your solution is too great, or like I align with it, but I just don't really believe that your product is intrinsically linked to what I'm trying to solve here. That's the most common. And you just sort of go, it doesn't matter how much marketing you spend, if that product has like this high barrier to like adoption, right? It just could be like, let's just say if it requires you to completely rewire your accounting system, it's like, oh, all you got to do is unplug Xero and plug in this, and then change your accountants over here and just update all your privacy policies with this and read out, your share registry. It's all just too hard, right? And it doesn't, and you might be fixing $100, $200 problem, but it falls into the too hard basket.
Yeah.
That is really common. The other one is if potential customers are given the opportunity to procrastinate, they will. So we did some marketing for a I'll be really careful not to give too much information away, but a medical compliance startup. And let's just say that the medical professionals we're targeting, there was legislation that had said they needed to do some particular work. The reality was no one had been fined or questioned or charged under this legislation, which meant that the medical professionals were like, totally agree, sounds like a great idea, we'll think about it. Why are they thinking about it? Because until someone loses their license or gets a serious fine, they don't actually feel like they have to do it, right? So we could get attention, we could be databases, we could have conversations, and every single conversation, this is great, totally agree. We'll think about it. And why? Because until the governing bodies come in and actually remove a medical license and scare people, they're not going to jump over the line.
Sure.
And we just find that happens all the time. For a lot of people, it's just kind of like, yep, I agree, but it doesn't feel urgent right now. And this is true in our lives in lots of different things, right? It's really hard to sell things like recycling or environmental issues because you can always push a little bit further and no, we'll deal with that later. That's tomorrow's problem, right? Saving for retirement, that's tomorrow's problem. Dieting, health, cutting out some booze, that's start next week, right? And that's true of most startups. They're solving a problem that you can probably just delay it for a little bit. And in that case, no matter how much marketing you do, look, you're going to struggle, right? And we talk about startups, things that make a startup successful, timing, luck, these things matter, right? So if you're going to launch a startup and it turns out at the exact time where the government does something and creates a new policy or sends some people to jail, whatever, it's probably a good time, right?
Yeah.
So timing is important.
I guess where I come from is like, I feel like I've been watching the same ads for 20 years now.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? Like Coca-Cola.
Yep.
Why do I see a Coca-Cola ad? If you don't know what a Coca-Cola is, like, do you think putting it on television is really going to capture that person? Like something else is happening where that person doesn't know what a Coca-Cola is. I don't know what the value is. And
actually, that's a good point.
Horse.
What is the value of still advertising Coke?
Yeah,
Coca-Cola.
I guess I come from a privileged position in the sense that about a decade ago, I did do advertising. So, going back to when I had my big agency hat on, I did get, and look, the marketers that work at the Coca-Cola company are good. Like they know their game. Like they turned up and I was like, oh my God, you've hired a marketing agency. You know way more than us. I think the thing is that Coca-Cola is ubiquitous. It's like, I think Rory Sutherland said it, something along this line, which is it's the product that if you order it, that the waiter will say, apologize if they don't have it.
Yeah.
So you go into one of these, like a Pizza Hut where they have Pepsi. And they're, oh, can I have a Coke? And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we've got Pepsi. Is that okay? And
No.
it's like, just think about
No
that
is
brand
my
power.
answer at every time. No, it's not okay.
Sycophant.
I am.
And that's, look, so they're just at that unbelievable brand level where they are just crushing people. And so, where you can become, I just remember speaking to them and they would sort of like, I would say Coke. And then you'd learn really quickly that they call themselves Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola company, and the full brand. And that's because Coke became like the commoditized brand. I forget that there's legalities behind what it is, right? But when your brand becomes the thing, then you can lose control of it. But that's where they got to. It is probably the only product around the world you can ask for, and people understand what it is, and they price it like that. So super defendable brand, right?
But what about let's use insurance for an example.
Mm-hmm.
You could have the coolest insurance branding I've ever seen in my life. It's not going to stop me from going to compare the market and just seeing who has the best price. Like, what is the advantage from marketing in these situations? Like, I can imagine if it's a tech where there's like
trust,
or there's just not much on the market, and it's like, oh man, this person's breaking in.
But I think from if you go, you're still going to go to compare the market, right?
Yep.
And if you have seen Amy and Yui and these other ones, like constantly this brand that you've seen flooded around and stuff like that, and you're at compare the market, and then you see some other brand and you're like, who is that? You're going to trust these other ones initially because you've seen their brand name out there rather than the little one at the bottom that you're like, who is that? That's in regards to insurance. But, same things go. When I was, working in digital marketing sales, was my biggest thing was like, okay, baked beans. Who is the first brand you think of when you think of baked beans?
How many
Heinz.
big beans?
Oh, God.
Sorry.
Heinz. Okay, tomato sauce or ketchup. Heinz. You think of Heinz, right?
Yeah.
That's who you think of. And do they need to advertise more? Well, probably not. But they do it to continue, I believe, that trust, that consumer trust, that they're still there. They've been around forever. And they're there to remain at the forefront of any competitor that might taste better, that might be cheaper, but you trust that Heinz label.
Mm.
You trust Coke. You trust Yui or Amy or whatever, rather than the tiny little one at the bottom of the compare list. Am I right?
That's the value of brand, right? The
Yeah.
value of brand is the difference between the base cost and the premium you're willing to pay. So am I willing to pay more to have Suncorp or Amy insurance? Yes. And what's the brand value? The brand value is the difference between Suncorp and budget, right? And the more that Suncorp is trusted in a particular market or any big insurance company, that's the value of the brand, right? So, you know, when people say, how do you value a brand? It's like, it's the premium you pay above the baseline cost because of the trust associated with that brand.
Yeah.
Now, I actually have done marketing for Compare the Market. And, you know, we're talking about one of my failed startups. I actually ran an insurance comparison business and did and know the guys behind Compare the Market as well and what they did.
Oh.
So I know that space. Look, I SEO'd my site to the top. So if you would, it was a window of time in Australia. If you Googled, you know, home insurance comparison, car insurance comparison, my website was at the top. Now, that's before I won't go into the long stories about general insurance compliance and monopolistic behaviors or duopolistic behaviors in Australia. You know, that was the battle. Like, those brands did not want me or any other comparison site to exist. And they would actively use existing legislation and processes to make it difficult for a company like me. So my first iteration of zippy.com.au was insurance comparison. I SEO'd it to the top. I could produce a lot of different quotes. That was what Suncorp and Australian Insurance Group, Insurance Australia Group, did not want anyone to do in the market. They didn't want to be compared on price. They wanted it to be the other market. Now, as a result of that, you know, eventually Budget launched Compare the Market, and Compare the Market came in and then commoditized the industry. But look, you know, let's keep it really real. Compare the Market and Budget are the same company. So, you know, what is Compare the Market really, other than trying to bring the perceived value of brand down, commoditize general insurance, and allow brands like Budget to actually exist? In saying that, I mean, there's Budget ads everywhere. So they are playing the same game, right? At the same time, Budget is increasing their brand value. And I just bought a little MG3 car for my daughter to learn to drive in, and it's got Budget insurance. And you know what? And I did it. And I told my wife, and she was like, yeah, okay, I've seen Budget. They're a good company. And so she had that kind of safety in brand. So even a brand like Budget, which by its very brand definition shouldn't be about brand value, have over the last 5 to 7 years increased their brand value to the point where my wife was happy that was the insurance we took out, where it would not have been the case 10 years ago with Budget. Same product, but bigger brand value. So yeah, you know, look, I totally agree with what you were saying. You know, there is a lot of value in brand, and it is the difference that you're willing to pay. And I continue to do it, right? Like, I will continue as a consumer. I will continue to buy brands that I trust, and it takes time, you know, and I don't know. The other really prevalent example at the moment is, you know, the influx of Chinese EV cars. You know, those brands have to come in and offer, like, you know, every car that I've been involved with my whole life was always 3 years warranty. And then these cars, and then sort of the South Korean brands came in and started introducing 5-year warranties, and now Chinese companies coming 10-year warranties. Like, they're trying to
There's
create
10-year
that
warranties?
Yes. Yeah.
On the battery, I think, not on everything.
No,
else.
the whole car. Like, BYD is just a beast. But the other thing too is BYD have also been in Australia now for, like, I think about 5 years. So they're starting to get trusted. And the same people, like, I had some painters in my house the other day, and you know, talking to the brands, he goes, BYD, oh yeah, they're great. They've been around for a while. And you could see him, I'm like, there's no way 5 years ago, the painter that I was talking to would have been in any way considering either 1, an EV, or 2, a Chinese car. But, you know, they've built that brand value. So
just for clarity, I will never consider either of those things.
No? Yeah. I guess I always wonder, like, where the rubber meets the road for a lot of people. Like, I just feel like my heart tells me people are just going to go with the best prices these days. I feel like...
Yeah. For certain things, I think.
I have a saying in marketing, which is not my saying. I've borrowed it from someone else, but I can't remember who to give credit to. But if your customer is making a decision based on price, then you have failed to position your value add correctly in the market, right? So if I can't see why else I would choose your brand, I will default to price. Price is the place. You know your positioning and your branding has failed if people are considering price, because price you can compare. So as a marketer, if you compete on price, that's like the laziest approach. Let's just run a sale and discount the price. Like, price is linear, it's divisible. We can work out what's cheaper than something else. So if you're competing on price, then you've failed with your branding and your marketing. If people aren't considering price, so if there's a founder of a business here and they find that in their negotiations, the negotiation ends up being based around price, you need to go back and think about your positioning and your value adds and reframe your business and your product or your service so that people don't consider price. Price should just be that thing that they agree to at the end that makes complete sense because of what you've already sold them. If you're thinking of price, it's because I haven't been able to get my hooks into any of the other things you've been saying, and I'm ultimately just going to go with the cheapest one. And I think that if there was one thing you take away from listening to a podcast, if you're being challenged on price, you failed on positioning. If you failed on positioning, you are going to get squeezed on price and margin. You haven't created any value. You haven't got any brand equity there. Put a premium in it. You're going to have to come back the other way. So look, it's pretty common, right? And so whilst Fractal works with startups, and that's our primary business, we do work with a lot of existing businesses that are kind of need to take a startup approach, which is like, actually, we're getting crushed and we need to think about the market has changed. The world is different. How are we going to tackle it? Because we're just constantly losing out on price. And it's like, well, we might need to rebuild your business a bit. So
I wonder if I'm just like, I have a broken mindset because I lived in Italy and in Southeast Asia. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you do. It's going to be a hard negotiation at the end.
Yeah.
When someone like ever came to me and like, that's the price. And I'm like, well, that's me leaving.
Yeah, that's the price, but we know it's not.
Yeah. I don't know. I always find it this way. I always find it really odd when someone says like, I can't budge on the price. I'm like, you don't budge on the price. We're not in business together.
I bought a scooter in London. I remember walking in to a scooter dealership. You know, London's flat. I could buy a cheap one. And I wanted to buy a Vespa because, you know, Vespa was cool. And that's what I wanted, the Italian, right?
Yeah.
And the guy looked at me and he just said, and I was looking, there was a cheaper one and it was a Piaggio. And I looked at it and he goes, okay, here's the deal. Piaggio own Vespa, right? You are literally paying an extra £1,000 to have the Vespa brand. So you just tell me which one you care more about. I'll take £1,000 off you and you can buy the Vespa, but it's the same engine, it's the same scooter, and Piaggio are the parent company and they're the ones behind it. I just remember thinking, and you know, when you're saying like Italian brands and things, and you go, even in Italy with a big brand like that, people pay the Vespa premium. Like a Vespa is a more expensive scooter than a Piaggio, and yet Piaggio are the parent company. And you're just like, damn, turns out I'm buying the same product with a different badge on it. And it's Italian too.
They do it intentionally. They make the Piaggio look ugly as sin, and then they put the Vespa next to it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can just get that one over there if you want to look idiot.
Here was my logic at the end. I am a 6'2", 100-kilogram male riding a scooter through London. I looked pretty stupid anyway. So I decided I may as well get a stupid scooter. The idea of me being like this sort of like cool, like, you know, you've got like the leather jacket. I can imagine you wearing the Italian style racing helmet, half thing with the goggles on. I looked like a twit. Like, I just looked so stupid. So I may as well say this out. I already looked bad. So I just in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, just look stupid. Look
You
stupid
just
all the way
leaned right
around.
into it.
I'm a firm believer. If you feel like you're going to look weird on a motorbike, get a scooter. Something about being on a scooter is like, well, this guy's not trying to be something that he's not.
That's true.
Anyone can get by in a scooter and just be like, you're good, man. You're good. It does look a little bit silly if you're like a ginormous person on a super sporty bike, though.
Yeah, it probably would.
Straddling a tricycle.
I don't think anyone in this conversation needs to worry about that, though.
No.
I think we're quite small human beings by the looks of it.
Legit.
No. Yeah.
I was going to ask, I'm worried I've already asked this before, but do you feel like there's any marketing pitfalls that owners make before they engage a company like you, where you're like, wait, stop this. I don't know where you came up with this idea. Like
The $5,000 to $10,000 perfectly pixel correct branding pack that they've gone and developed is I just kind of look at it and I go, it's not wrong, right? Like if you engage a professional and you pay them an appropriate amount of money, they'll produce an appropriate amount of work. But if you haven't got any customers, you haven't tested anything yet, do you need a $10,000 branding pack? It's like, there's a reason to have it, but gee, let's engage a few people first, right? And it hurts my soul a bit when I look at someone who's, spent that much money and they might be, a quarter of the way into their budget and they spent it on branding. That kind of stuff just hurts. It's not, there's a time and a place and I totally value it, but right at the start is not the time to be doing it. Even to the point of someone who prints off 5,000 business cards, you're like the number of people who go and get business cards printed, like it's like that's the default thing they do. Oh, it's cheaper to buy 5,000. Why have you got 5,000? I mean, who has business cards anyway anymore?
I know.
Let alone,
Seriously.
why did you get 5,000 of them, right? So again, it just gets back to that core thing. It's like, what do I need to test? Like, what's the absolute minimum I need to do? And I just think people are really fast to engage accountants and lawyers and brand designers, all these costs that feel like the right thing. They feel like what you should be doing, and you're happily parting with your money because I want to set it up correctly. And you look at a business and you just go, have you seriously created like this, they'll create a group structure. Oh, the IP is held in a shell company in the Cayman Islands, and I've put the banking current account in Switzerland, and then I've got my trading account coming out of Ireland because it's a tax haven, and then I've got my operating company in Australia. And you're like, dude, that's like $25,000, $35,000 of accounting fees, and you haven't got a single dollar in revenue, but you've got like enterprise level corporate tax evasion set up. I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah. Let's pull back on that one for the time being.
Just a little bit. Like they're trying to work out how to cut down their capital gains tax.
I see the intention.
Yeah.
Let's just slow it down a little bit.
Do you think storytelling is becoming an art that people are losing in the whole entire marketing piece?
Oh my God, yes. I'm going to say yeah. I'm going to jump in with a yes.
Good, because it's me too.
Oh, you too?
Yeah.
It's hard. I think it's because people don't feel like they've got enough time to tell a story. And so you kind of look and you go, I've only got seconds. People don't have attention. I can't tell the whole story. Yeah. The only thing, and I'm not a great storyteller. I think I am once I learn the story in my head, but inside of Fractal, I've got Tim, who's one of the team members. He's good at writing it, right? So when I get to the stage of how I'm going to articulate this, give it to Tim, like not Joe. Remember I spoke about the triangles? Yeah. My writing ability is on the edge of my triangle, whereas Tim's writing ability is on the top of his. And I think one of my clients said it to me, and they kind of said, look, we don't need to tell the whole story. We just need to get someone to read a chapter. I'm like, oh, that's really good. You can come work for us. But I think you need to know your story, but you just need to understand your chapters. And then if you can get your chapters and your snippets and then your highlights and you go, oh, it's like a movie. You've only got to get out the little highlight bit, right? So just get the supercharged gun battle scene, that part of your story, get people to buy it on that. And then you get a chance to tell the whole story. And I was like, and I love it because I think, that's not me coming up with that idea. That's a client telling me my own idea back to me. And I'm like, it sounds better when you say it like that.
Yeah. That's good. That's what you said.
Don't you hate it when someone else does
now
that?
pretend I said it because I'm going to charge you for it, right? Classic consultant.
That's exactly what I was saying. You've picked that up so well. Well done.
Yeah. Jared writes it down, saves it for a day. He appears on a podcast and claims it as his own. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Love that.
Well, we're coming up to the hour here, and I've got to say this has definitely been one of the more funner conversations I've had. I absolutely love that you are clearly extremely passionate about what it is you do.
It oozes, doesn't it? It oozes out of you.
Yeah. I was stuck in this like, oh yeah, I'm just listening. I forgot. I got like questions I need to ask here.
You got to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I did. I was just like,
I found the same thing though.
I was part of the podcast.
Yeah. I was like, at one point I was like,
he's right.
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh shit, none of us has said anything for like 3 seconds.
Yeah. That's also because of who I am. Like I'm, getting my Amazon deliveries. Do you know, and I know that's not the first time it's happened on your podcast because I listened to your other one. So I absolutely know that deliveries come. So I can just ignore that. But yeah, look, give a middle-aged white man a microphone and he'll talk forever. So apologies for that. But to link it back to what you said at the start with, my background, that's my origin story, right? My
Yeah.
origin story is I've been a founder. I know what it's like. So I've been through that journey, and I've been on agency side, right? So, why do I care? Well, I lost a heap of money. Like I wasted years, not wasted, years of my life disappeared and it didn't work out. And so, is it empathy or is it just like, PSD, right? Like it's, why do I care about it? I care because I know what it feels like. I know how risky it is to do your own business. And I know how much I want someone to realize that dream. So, a little bit of empathy. I like to think I'm a reasonably nice guy, but it's also because I remember what it was like and I tried really hard and it didn't work out for me. And, I'd be lying if I said I still didn't want to test some of my thesis. Like, I had a startup idea. I still think it probably should work, but, you've got to walk away from it. But, that to me is really important. And it's really important that people come in with the right empathy. And if as a small business owner, in the inverse to what we said before, right? Like I like working with founders because they want to hear what's the right thing.
Yep.
I genuinely think for a business owner, they should work with small agencies and independents and consultants too, because they're going to understand what it is.
Yeah.
If you go hire a really big agency and you're talking to a middle ranking marketing director or manager, they're not going to really care about your dollars because it's not the way that they've been trained. It's not their experience. So, in the same way, if you run and own your own business, and look, I think people intrinsically do this anyway, but work with other business owners. There's plenty of small independent agencies and contractors you can work with. And just leave the big glass meeting room agencies to work with the big glass corporates.
Yeah.
And they can have their own middle manager conversations and do the way they want to do it. If you're a business owner, speak to another business owner, support small business and independence. And not only because I think you should, but also they are going to be empathetic to your plight and your struggles. And they're not going to just be looking at a bottom line and walk away from you.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gerard. That was amazing.
Not a problem.
Give us a last minute elevator pitch of who you are, what you're about, how people can find you.
So Fractal, we're a startup marketing agency. If you own a business and you find yourself, battling on price and losing business, or you're just struggling to get that traction with your ads and you're not quite sure who your target customer is, we're probably the best agency for you. We'll help you out. We keep it short. We have no long-term contracts. We're in and out. We do it by the sprint. If you want to give us a week's notice, we're all good. We're pretty easygoing. If you want to find me, find me on LinkedIn is probably the best way. Reach out, go to the website. You can book a 30-minute, chat with me. I will always make time for founders and do the best I can to help you. And I promise you, I will deliver radical candor. If I think the idea is rubbish and it's not going to work, I will tell you. And as much as that hurts, it's from a place of love.
That's right. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on to the Tech Panel and sharing your story and all about Fractal.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolute
Thanks.
pleasure having you, mate. Cheers.
Megan, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning into the Tech Panel. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay connected. A big thank you to our major sponsor, Codeworthy, for powering today's episode. And join us again on the next episode of the Tech Panel, where tech minds meet.